Welcome to Moonbeaming, a podcast about magic, creativity, the tarot, lunar living, and more. I'm your host, Sarah Faith Gottesdiener, and I'm so happy you're here. Hi, welcome back. You are listening to Moonbeaming, a podcast about creativity, intuition, and living a magical life in the end times. I'm your host, Sarah. It's me. I'm an artist. I'm an author of the Moon Book, and I am one very tired witch. Welcome, welcome, welcome. If you're tired, if you're wired, if you're fired up, this is a very welcoming place for all kinds of states of emotions and energies. So you can very much come as you are here. A little note before we begin that I think it's next week. I cannot believe we are almost at the end of the year and this month, but here we are. Next week, I'll be announcing our monthly giveaway. Yes, this is a giveaway where you leave this show a 5-star review. You say why you love it, and then you get a chance to win a 30-minute tarot reading with me. Not a bad deal. My books are closed. They'll be closed for quite a while, and then they will only be open to my former wonderful clients and my incredible Patreon subscribers who are supporting this podcast. So this is it, babes. This is your chance to get to win a free 99 reading with me, myself, your guides. Who knows? Who knows who else is going to turn up? It's always a surprise to me. And for real, your guides, spirits, and beloved ancestors are always there for you if and when you are ready. But you already know that, right? You already know that. You don't need an altar. You don't need to light a candle, though it helps. You merely have to reach out with intention and belief. And, cast a protective circle and ground and make sure that you're in a good headspace, all that jazz. But I digress. I digress because it's what I do. Okay, we've got an episode to get into. This conversation you are about to hear is a really special one. Today on the podcast, we have two people I really respect and admire, Chauna Bryant and Susan Ateh. Chauna Bryant is a breathwork meditation facilitator, Pilates and gyrotonic instructor. That sounds like a fun time. And founder of the Breath Liberation Society. With 15 years of experience, Chauna assists her clients in cultivating their mind, body, and breath alignment. In the spring of 2021, Chauna founded Breath Liberation Society, or BLS for short. Breath Liberation Society is a radically inclusive, diverse, and trauma-informed breathwork community. It is committed to cultivating liberation and transformation through the breath. Susan Ateh is a breathwork facilitator, actor, and writer. She aids the body's ability to heal itself from emotional wounds through specialized breathwork techniques. Susan uses her unique skill set to help people amplify their voices, take up space, and showcase their abilities. With an open heart, Susan guides you through a transformative experience. I wanted to have these shining stars on the podcast for a number of reasons. They are active facilitators in the breathwork space. They are super smart, very skilled. I also wanted to have them on to talk about breathwork. I get questions about it, and I wanted to go more into what it is exactly for all of you who are curious. I was also incredibly impressed by an accountability process that they and a number of other folks facilitated in 2020 and what came of it. This year, in a Hierophant year, I wanted to talk about problematic teachers. I wanted to talk about discernment. I wanted to talk about accountability. And so I really wanted to have an episode that highlighted the anatomy of an accountability process, because a common refrain I will hear is, what do I do? How do I approach a teacher that is causing harm or is racist or is culturally appropriative? I mean, we could be here all day, right? There's a whole laundry list, particularly in the new age space, So I get that question, what do I do? There's a lot of fear and intensity and confusion, and for a lot of good reasons. It's hard to stand up to a teacher with critique. There's already an inherent power dynamic there at play. Or it might be complicated. You might really love them, and there might be an aspect or something they said that you need them to know about, but maybe you're wary. I mean, there are so many different scenarios of how this plays out. And I wanted to have folks on the podcast who experienced this, who took action, so we could go over what worked and what didn't work. Listen, the so-called wellness or spiritual space, the new age space, or even witchcraft spaces can be filled with snake oil salespeople, narcissists, and other folks who are causing harm in any number of ways. I am posting a bonus episode for my Patreon subscribers that goes into more detail about how to be discerning about the practitioners you work with and listen to, and who you give your precious energy and awareness and money to. So look out for that on the Patreon. Discernment is really important, babes. As someone who has been through the ringer myself with certain people, who has absolutely taken a step back from looking for community in certain spaces for many reasons, I understand how painful and confusing it can be to experience situations like this. Unfortunately, they happen, and they happen pretty frequently. And I'm just sharing this because you're not alone if something like this, getting involved with a harmful teacher or a harmful group, has happened to you. I'm so sorry. In this episode, Chauna and Susan talk about how they dealt with irresponsible teachers, I'd say harmful. And the two of them are such incredible examples about how you can call folks in, how you can ask people to take accountability with respect, compassion, and a lot of generosity. It's an awesome episode to listen to if you've been curious about breathwork, if you've just been like, what is this? I've heard about it. What is it? If you want to know how different folks approach a singular modality in different ways, if you want to figure out how to make facilitating, holding space, healing your vocation, if you have felt alone in the spiritual or wellness space, if you are a person of color there, if you are trans there, if you are non-binary, queer, if you are disabled, if you have mental health stuff like you're depressed, you're not love and light enough, for whatever reason you've been made to feel alone in these kinds of spaces, this episode is for you. And you're not alone. You're not in feeling that way. I have felt that way many times. I also love Susan's and Shauna's friendship and witnessing that just brings me joy. So hopefully this will make you feel inspired to phone a friend or voice memo them and tell them why you love them. I don't think that there needs to be a content warning. We don't go into like a lot of detail, but if you're not in the mood, don't do it. Put on your kitten podcast or your kitten cam and just vibe to that. No worries. Okay, everyone, here it is, an expansive and informative conversation with Susan Ateh and Chauna Bryant. Hello, hello. I could not be more excited to have two amazing, brilliant, beautiful, kind, experienced guests with me today on the show. Today I have Susan and Chauna. I would love for both of you to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Hi, my name is Susan Ateh. I am Irish Cameroonian. I say that because my mom's Irish, my dad's from Cameroon, and I had the pleasure and privilege of growing up in both those countries. So I come to life with kind of that experience. I am a breathwork facilitator. I'm also an actor, and I write in my own spare time and let very few people read it.
Well, I'm sure in the coming months and years, more people will be reading it, right?
You never know. The courage. Everybody has something that they need a little bit of a courageous moment to let it be seen, right?
I am Chauna. I am extremely thrilled that Susan just named herself as a writer, which we can talk about later, but that just made my day. So I just want to put that out there. Yeah, I live in Washington, D.C. I am a native of Southern California. I like to say that's still home, even though I've been here for quite some time. I am a Pilates instructor. That's kind of my day job. I am a breathwork facilitator, and I am the founder of Breath Liberation Society, a learning and community space for breathwork facilitators.
I mean, amazing. Both of you are four-letter words, starts with a B, ends with a Y, and that is busy. Both of you do a lot of different things. How did you come to finding out that there are all these like different activities, that you like to do? And also, how do you juggle all of them?
So this is an incredibly well-timed question. I realized, I think 3 weeks ago, that I don't juggle them. That's been a big, it's been a very big thing for me this summer. I I think essentially a friend pointed out that I have about 3 jobs, and that at best I'm giving all 3 of my jobs 33% of my time. And several of them need about 100% of my time. So in terms of juggling, I don't think I've had the most balanced of lives this last year. I think I've definitely worked a lot. I think it's easy to do when you have a lot of passion projects, when you feel very, very, I guess I'm going to use the word passion again, but when you feel like what you're doing is making a difference, it's easy to kind of plow forward. But I definitely found myself very tired and overwhelmed by like the middle to end of July. So right now, how I'm juggling is I just finished redoing my schedule. I moved all my Pilates clients to Wednesdays, Fridays. For the first time in my adult life, I have a day or two off a week, which is a very big deal. And yeah, that's how I'm juggling.
I love the realness of that answer because I think there are so many people listening who can completely relate. So I'm so grateful for you for sharing so honestly about that. And I'm so happy that you're rearranging your schedule.
Yeah, I think I'm somebody who literally flies by the seat of their pants, if I'm being really honest. And I'm also someone who loves being in the flow. So therefore, I'm not a structured person. And society keeps telling me I need to be structured, and then I keep fighting that I need to be structured. Everything that I do is because I'm passionate about it, which I think has it's interesting because I think that's both a wonderful thing and also something that it's a tricky one to maneuver sometimes, because a lot of it is where I'm drawn to the work, but not necessarily the money. So in terms of juggling that way, I don't do a great job of that. But and I think when I'm really in the flow, things always seem to just be in the right space in the right time. And that feels really good for me. But I do definitely feel the strain and the stress sometimes of what I am. And it's interesting what I am supposed to think that I want. It's, that's how it feels.
Wow. Again, like that's a whole, we could just start because that's a whole thing, right? Like what we really want versus what we maybe think we want or are led to think that we want. And as both of you were speaking, I actually remembered this other conversation I was having with a dear friend of mine who is interested in many different things, right? Similar to both of you. He works in the healing arts or the wellness space, and also he's an incredible writer, like an incredible writer. And we were saying how our society doesn't want us to be like holographic, multiplicitous beings. They want us to do one thing all the time within this thing. And you're sort of seen as like flaky or not committed or not disciplined or not devoted enough if you want to do three things, or you want to change what you're doing throughout your life. And there's nothing more natural to us. We're all creatives. Everyone listening is a creative, whether you are an accountant or a dog walker or I don't know what, if you make, I don't know, PDFs, whatever, you're still creative and you're human. And we go through these cycles and we're just not meant to be the same all the time.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that, especially for me, because I say especially for me only because I'm in London right now and I was in Ireland. And so this is, where my mom's from Ireland. And so I'm around my family right now. And that gets really magnified, extremely magnified. And being around people who have the home and the kids and the house and the 9 to 5 and are living next to their mother and all those things are really wonderful. However, it's not the life I chose. And I really wrestle with that every time that I come here. And there's almost like this pull inside of me. And exactly what you're saying, it's there's something about it that feels like there's something internally wrong that I want to do multiple things. I do have times where I have the thought that's like, oh, you're lazy, or why do you want to drop this? You're not committed to that. But actually, when I really sit and I'm kinder, more compassionate with myself, it's because I love the excitement of different things. I'm that kind of a human. And I love to move from one creative place to another creative place. And when I really look at it, they're all linked. So, it's just a different way of expressing myself. But society tells me and creates worry for my family, right? About, well, what does this look like for you? Like, you can't keep doing this for the rest of your life. And it's like, doing what? Living? That's the question.
You have any thoughts, Chauna?
Yeah, I agree. I also got to travel home and see family over the summer, and I think having been an entrepreneur for I think it's been like 10 or 12 years now, but still kind of in this space that it's hard for people to define. Like I was in fitness, now there's breath work, and I think it's really hard for people to understand my like inability to fit into a box, like something that and I'm using air quotes, but like something that like makes sense to everyone about like how how you spend your time. And there definitely is this pull to want to just be like, fine, now I'm an accountant. Are you happy? But I think I know that I wouldn't be happy. I know Susan dealt with me crying so much over like 2 years ago because I wanted to be a nurse. I was like, I'm done. I quit. I'm going to go get it. I'm throwing in the towel. And I was like I was taking classes, and it's so funny. Every like reading that I went to, every friend that I have was just like, why are you doing this? Like, that's not for you. And I was like, no, but I just want to have something I can explain. I just want to, like, I want like a normal job. Anyways, I'm not in nursing school. But yeah, it was definitely, I've done that. I did it. And still here. I think I'm just going to keep on my weirdo path now. I'm happier here.
Yes.
And the beautiful thing about that actually was at that time, it was everything she would do. Like there was just a big scream, like, no, no, a block, a block, a block. It's like, no, but I really need this. And it was just like, what are you doing? Take a breath. So I'm really glad you found your way.
That reminds me of something I had to talk about with the two of you, which is friendship. The two of you are dear friends. I would love to hear about how you met, what you connected over. Yeah, just like that little love story.
All right, so I'll go. Susan and I met in breathwork training on like in a rural area on a mountain in middle America. And it's interesting. We went to breathwork training. I can't remember if it was before the presidency or during the elections, but I remember we were in a spot in America where we were having a lot of racism just come up to the front of the stage. Whereas there used to be whispers and maybe people were pretending. No one was pretending. The president wanted to build a wall. It was awful. And I remember being so worried flying to the middle of nowhere when I didn't know anyone. And I was like, just kind of building up my armor and my confidence, like ready to be the only Black person in the room and just get what I could. And just, just like toughening myself up, like, you can do this, you need this. And we were all kind of doing like ride sharing and such from the airport because the commute to the house was a bit far. And I was meeting, like, we all had like a little thread, and I didn't look anybody up, which is weird because had I Googled you, movie star, that would have come up easily, but I didn't. So I was like walking through the airport, and I was like looking for someone named Susan who had like yellow or something. And I remember I saw Susan, and I was like, oh, thank God. Oh, thank goodness I'm not by myself here. And that's how I met Miss Ateh. We actually, we had partners all the time at breathwork training. We were never partnered up, not once, but for some reason we always ended up sitting near each other. And I think by the end of the week, I was like, by the way, I know we didn't get to hang out, but we're friends now. So just FYI. And that's that.
It was actually, it was great because Chauna was the first person that I think came and was like, hey, I'm Chauna, at the airport. And our friendship really grew like after the breathwork training. Even though I will say this, the women at that training were all majority incredible women, like wise and open and warm. And so that was such a blessing. We were just really, really lucky. And I think afterward, our relationship got deeper as well because there was that sense of, oh, now what? Like we were just kind of left after the training with no support system, no community. It was just like go out into the world and do what? I mean, I already had reservations anyway because my own lack of confidence was like, well, I'm just going to do it for my friends and family, and this was for me. But so reaching out and like starting to talk about it, and then we created our own little community where we were able to hold each other accountable, support each other, and kind of really work through what we needed to be and who we needed to be as breathwork facilitators, holding very vulnerable, delicate, beautiful, fragile space for people.
That's so beautiful. What are the gifts that this friendship has given you?
So many. I think texts and just random texts. How are you? My boyfriend breaking up with me and not having somebody to spend my birthday with, and Chauna taking the train and spending it with me, being able to cry freely, knowing that you can count on the person and that they will be there, walking through and talking through life, and it in all its facades, the happy, the triumphant ones, the giving courage to move forward and say, you can do this, keep going, teaching each other. Yeah, just so many things.
Yeah, I'll add to that list. I think support's been a big deal for both of us. Perspective. I think in a lot of like healing spaces, there's all these talks about like, oh, you're going to start losing friends and blah, blah, blah. And like, I think I have my own opinions on that, but I do think that as we grow, as we gain personal strength, we learn new perspectives, we start to build better boundaries. I think a lot of times that is hard for the people in our lives. So it's been really nice to have somebody else who's like one of my dearest friends, but outside of that immediate circle to go to and be like, hey, am I not being humble? Am I not like just like a nice little like gut check? Like, is this not me? Am I not being humble? Is this, can I curse on here? Like, is this, is this bullshit? Like, I think I like run stuff by Susan constantly around that. I'm just like, is this, am I not seeing it? And I think being able to get this like kind of honest perspective again from somebody who has a bird's eye view, but that I trust fully has my best interests at heart has been really, really nice. I joke with Susan that like I always want to call her and be like, and then this horrible thing may happen. And like you'd expect like a really good friend to be like, oh, okay, then what? And Susan's like, okay, so what? What are you going to do then? What are you going to do? Fix it. And I'm like, oh, well, like I wish I'd called a nicer friend, but now that you've said that, I guess I can fix it. It's like, it's wonderful to have that.
Yes. And like, I feel like Susan is very intuitive, and Chauna probably also secretly knows you kind of want that little bit of tough love. Like, you got this. You also, Chauna, brought up something I wanted to go into, and that is the overwhelming whiteness of the wellness space. Like it, and I would also sort of add on to that as my own personal experience as being a queer person, just the overwhelming heteronormativity, cis-centered, binary. I could add many more descriptors. I shall not for the sake of time. And I just kind of like wanted to ask, has that been a deterrent for both of you in these spaces? What does it feel like? Like just what has that been like for you, for both of you?
So I can also speak as a queer woman in these a queer newly engaged woman. I forgot to bring that up when I introduced myself.
Congrats!
Yeah.
When did that, was it just like, was it a surprise? Come on, let's what?
A couple weeks ago, I in our living room with our dog. I'll post a picture. Asked my beautiful girlfriend to marry me, and so we are now engaged. We're now fiancés. But what I will say about that is, yeah, I agree. I think the rigidity of a lot of healing spaces, this kind of reemergence of the divine feminine and the masculine energy thing that we keep seeing, that can be so limiting and so restrictive. And people are quite unapologetic about using those terms in spaces and about, just flat out Xing so many people out of the conversation by just using those really, really very, again, binary words. I will say that. But also, yeah, in race, I think after I did my breathwork training, I was just like, okay, I've got to find some other healer. I've got to find some other teachers. I remember I like came up. So my roommates in breathwork training, Sarah, had had one of your moon books, and that's how I found out about you. And I was like, all right, moon book. I like ordered my moon book or whatever. And I remember coming up to New York and meeting you and Zanetta and just being like, well, I'm done with straight white healers now. I'm done with that. I've got to diversify. And they're out there. Like, maybe they don't have these major platforms. Maybe they don't have a deal with freaking Aloe Yoga, but they're out there, and they're doing this great work that's been passed down from their generations, that they've researched, that they've learned. Maybe, colonization took it away, but they've done research and figured out how to make it their own. Like, there are healers and there are mystics and lovely people out there. You just have to look like 3 pages in to find them. And then you really start to find your community. You really start to find people that resonate with who you are and kind of what you want your space in this earth to look like. So that's what I'll say.
Yeah, I think you put it so beautifully, Chauna. I think for me as well, I'm also like, I always keep saying I'm relatively new to this wellness space. And I was talking to you on Monday, Sarah, and I was like, I don't know, something even about the word wellness now, I'm having like heebie-jeebies with. It's like, I feel like I'm gonna at some point eradicate all words and just start like communicating differently. Like, I don't know what I'm gonna use. Um, it's it's just it's just the feeling it brings up, right? But yes, it was also shocking for me. I also want to preface, I have a white mother, so I'm also mixed. I grew up a good part of my life in Ireland, and spent a lot of time in London. So I also come from a different perspective, and I also recognize my privilege within these perspectives. So I don't think that initially I was as hyper aware, but I really, when I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. And I think that you're absolutely right, Shauna, the idea of you have to look 4 pages in, and that angered me and still saddens me, still angers me. And just the amount of credibility that we give whiteness in these spaces. And then when you kind of scratch the surface or you look deeper, there's so much cultural appropriation that is happening at every single turn, and a lot of lack of acknowledgement of where the practices are coming from, where the tools are coming from. And I think it's a real problem. And sometimes I want to be done with this area of the wellness world, because I feel like we're constantly fighting. But then I stop and I go, okay, but even if I just do a little bit, at least I'm representing. Like it becomes not about me. It's kind of, you it's our duty in a lot of ways.
Yes, and we're going to get into how both of you are doing that as well in your own lives and in communities. I did just want to sort of chime in as both of you were speaking, something that occurred to me, which is that I think when we're looking for a teacher or someone to learn from, I think it's really important to know what the person's cosmology is, what their belief system is, what their context is, what they think about politics, what they understand about systems of oppression. Because as you said, with these words like wellness, what is it, health and wellness, Rachel Ricketts calls it the wealth and hellness, and like I like want to be really clear, like I'm done, like I never wanted to be a part of, I didn't even know it existed, to be honest with you. And then I kind of got exposed to it, let's just say, by nature of the kind of work I was doing. I think a lot of people think I'm in that world, and I don't consider, like, I mean, that's a whole nother convo. I think we have to just create the communities and the realms and the paradigms that we would like. And the other thing I was going to say as you were speaking, and I'd love to hear you chime in, is like, there's this word that does rub me the wrong way, and that word is healing. And the reason why it rubs me the wrong way in certain white wellness spaces is that, like, if you're a white person and you're not working on dismantling your internalized whiteness, your internalized, oppression, racism, misogyny, whatever it is, how can you be like healing anyone if you're just going to replicate unconscious biases, if you're just going to replicate power dynamics, if you are going to not be interested in cultural competency, like, other viewpoints, other cosmologies, your own lineage, your own ancestry, how are you like healing? I'm putting this in air quotes, and I'd really love to hear both of you chime in on that if you have any thoughts.
Well, the beautiful thing about that is just even listening to you, I'm like, oh yeah, I went away from the breathwork training with none of that, with all that list, like nothing, you know, um, no talk of lineage, no talk of responsibility, no code of ethics, no, there's just so many things lacking of being a responsible person in that arena. And the word healing, I don't particularly love it. The only reason being for me, and absolutely everything you've encapsulated 100%. For me, it makes me feel really uneasy because it is saying that I'm doing something that the other person can't do for themselves. And I 100% not on that path. And that is my biggest issue with that word for me.
Yep, I totally agree. I think the word healing, I think calling myself a healer, I think it takes away the agency and it takes away the personal power of the person who is working with me. And something that I know we all say that a lot, but I think what the uglier part that we don't mention is that it takes away the agency and the confidence and the courage and the self abilities to better oneself away from that person. It puts it squarely on my shoulders. Now I'm doing something, which I think turns it into this kind of guru goddess atmosphere that I've never been comfortable with. Like I'm here to support. I am here to to observe, to witness. I'm not here to cure anyone. I'm not here to fix anyone. And I think when people are very comfortable wearing that title, I generally tend to stray away from that person simply because I'm like, well, I think that's something you want. And I don't need to I don't need to be here to witness it. I kind of see it that way. And thinking a lot about just about people being responsible in the wellness industry. And so I've actually been in the wellness industry forever because before breathwork I was in fitness, and that was the beginning of like the venture capitalists realizing that there are billions of dollars being spent on wellness, blah blah blah. We must commodify, and it turned into that. But what I've noticed, and this is in fitness, I've noticed it a lot in a lot of like yoga and even breathwork spaces, is that when we declare ourselves healers and we take away someone's personal power, we teach them to do the same thing. And we essentially create just like disciples to go on and perpetuate more harm. We almost like, knight them and send them on their way to half explain, to gaslight, and to cause more harm.
Yeah, both of you with the mic drop moments, like, yes, 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 could not agree more. I wanted to ask both of you, because we keep using the words, and I know some folks listening may not know what we're talking about when we say breath work. So I would love it if you could talk about what breath work is, how it helps, how it's healed or helped to heal you, all of those things, just a sort of primer for folks listening. And obviously, I need to disclaim, we're only just speaking for ourselves and our point of view. This is like, y'all can go on Google, you can read books, you can do your own research if you're interested, but I just wanted to kind of, you all know that listening though. I know, because you're so smart, but yes. Okay.
I'll give that one to you, Chauna, if you don't mind starting first. She has a wonderful training school.
So I tend to ramble a lot. So I was literally like not even looking up. I was writing down my answers so that way I could answer all of them without like going off on a tangent. So we'll see. I wrote down half of them. Breathwork is an active meditation that allows, it uses a rhythmic breathing pattern. And there's almost like an umbrella term at this point for breath work. And it almost always includes the use of breath in a meditative form. A lot of people do breath work in yoga. There's like that nasal breathing. A lot of times people just consider focused breathing to be breath work. Susan and I did a training where we practiced the 3-part breath. And that's a breath into the mouth, into the belly, into the mouth, into the chest with a big exhale. I know there's holotrophic breath work. That's a fun one to Google for anyone who is just listening. If you've ever seen the people doing like the hyperventilating breath in the ice baths, that's also a style of breath work. So really, breath work is a kind of umbrella term that can mean a lot of things, but specifically as we're speaking, Susan and I, speaking for you, jump in if I'm wrong, we're talking about a 3-part breathing practice that is very much energy work. It helps, especially, maybe you can't hear this through the microphone. I'm a pretty busy, energetic person. So breath work for me has been a way to calm down. I really had a hard time with traditional meditation. This idea, especially, I mean, now I can do some meditation, but originally I had a very tough time with just sitting and breathing and clearing my brain. Like, I feel like my brain's like, I'll run 3 laps, I'll make a grocery list. Also, do you remember that thing you did when you're 21? Like, my brain will go off. So for me, this breathing pattern that's just complicated enough for my brain to have something to do has been a really freeing part of my self-care. It's been a really freeing part of my, I'm using my air quotes again, healing journey, because it has really helped me to quiet my brain and feel my body. I grew up incredibly religious, and I'm a queer woman, so I have a I have a lot of healing to do. I have a lot of shit to sort out, and breathwork's been a very big tool for me to do that. So yeah, that's where I'm at with breathwork. Susan.
Yeah, so breath work for me. So yes, it's 3-part breath. Also it's a pranayama, patterned breath from Southeast Asia, correct? Yeah, and we think and hope, because it's very hard to pin it down. We're still, exploring that, because unfortunately that was never told to us where the origin of the breath was. It was, but it wasn't the place where it was originally from. For me, breath work has been an incredible tool to be able to live in my body. When I came to breath work, I had such a visceral response to it, and because I'd never really experienced my body's pain, I'd never really experienced what it was holding on to. So it was quite a really intense encounter, the first encounter. And I remember actually doing the breath for the first time, because just to preface, I went on my flow journey and decided I was going to do a breathwork training, having never done breathwork before. So I arrived there with never having done this breath. And the first time I did, I was like, yeah, okay, how do I get down this mountain, pack my bags, and get out of here? Because this is not for me. Because I just was so overwhelmed with how much I had been carrying, right? And so to be able to experience the pain that was within me, and to be able to let it move and to let it out, was so profound. So that was my experience with breath work. And it's funny because I laugh with Chauna, but she has her people that she goes to for breath work. And so she's like, if I need to cry, I'll come to Susan. And maybe it's because that's how my first experience with breath work was just so emotional, that I kind of have this ability to hold that space for people to really experience that part. I don't know, but yeah, it makes me laugh.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, so for folks who have never tried it before, what does a session with a practitioner look like? What can they expect? I know it's wildly different from person to person, even just the two of you sharing your experiences. For me, it's been sort of a mixed bag of what you were saying, Chauna, and also you, Susan. For me, I guess, I got to be honest with you, the sort of unexpectedness of it is a little much. Like I could go in being like, I'm going to just clear some of my energy or I'm going to settle in. And then I'm like sobbing about some mother wound I didn't know I had. And I'm like, wow, so there's that. It definitely, for me, it definitely brings a bunch up to the surface. But I would love to hear y'all's take on it, and what people can kind of expect, what it's good for, how you hold space, and so on and so forth.
Yes, there's definitely a time and a place to do breath work, right? Because the beautiful thing about it, but also, as you were saying, the unexpected thing that occurs, because what we're doing is really we're quieting the mind. And so we're allowing the intelligence of our body to start to communicate with us. So it's a very different way of communicating, because I know, for instance, and this is everything I'm saying is kind of from my personal experience and my journey, just so because everybody experiences this very differently and from session to session as well. But I think as well that when you're a young child who is very sensitive, in order to protect myself, I think that I kind of shut down the body and moved to the head so that I could move in the world and protect myself and feel safe. And so I think that's why when I go inward and take the journey of the breath, I then experience all these emotions that I had been suppressing. And so this particular breath is very powerful at bringing that to the surface. And then the little surprise part is that you just never know what's going to come up, you know? And so you can have this amazing intention and then, oh no, we're going here. And it's like, okay. So, yeah, when I have a session with a client, it's usually an hour and a half. I really take the time at the beginning to have a conversation. And when I'm having the conversation, there are a number of reasons I'm having them. First of all, for them to feel me and, so that they can feel safe. And of course, feeling safe is a big umbrella too. So, but having a dialogue, giving them the opportunity to share what's on their heart, on their mind, what they'd like to work through. And then we go into the breath. And I'm there holding the space, guiding them if it's their first time, and also depending on what they're going through. I'll allow quite a bit of dialogue between us. I always want that to be open, because I think that sometimes fear can come up and people feel, oh, I can't express myself or I can't say anything. I need to just do the breath. And so I really try to explain all of the different things that can come up, let them know that at any stage they can voice whatever's coming up for them. And for some people they go deep, for some people it's a lighter experience. And for some people they need an arch, they need to do it for a number of weeks. Other people just need one session. And I am adamant with this as well. When someone comes to me and after the session, they may say, oh, should I, like, when do I need to come back? And I'm like, I do not know. Again, with the way with the word healing, I have to give that back to you. You know when you need to come back, if you need to come back, right? So really trying to always empower the person, letting them recognize as well that this journey and this breath, it's an active breath. So you're taking ownership of your journey. It is hard work at the beginning. There's a lot of resistance, but I think meeting that resistance and allowing yourself to then journey inward gives you that sense of empowerment, allows you to know that, yes, okay, I'm going within. At any point, you get to stop, take a breath, and then go back to it when you can. I also encourage people to move their bodies. When I first started, we weren't really trained that way, where it's like we could just, or move our bodies, shake our bodies. I really encourage people to start to listen to what their body is asking of them. And then we also do vocal releases. The reason for that, again, it's just to move that energy. So what we're really doing is just moving energy that's stuck, energy that's suppressed. And the beautiful part as well is then when you're kind of peeling the onions of the stories or the patterns or things that are holding you back, you then start to really meet your essence. I like to call it like almost like my inner compass, and then the little whisper starts to become stronger, and over time you start to really communicate and commune with yourself, and that opens a whole different path of life, I think, rather than the one that we're sometimes feel we're told or should, or sometimes we don't even know, we're just kind of blindly walking, right?
That was beautiful. Chauna, is there anything you want to add to that?
2 points. I was thinking about, thank you, Susan, for bringing up the history of breathwork. I'm leading a breathwork facilitator training, and I started reading kind of all of the different histories of breathwork. So I thought I should add to it, which I think helps to explain kind of the anything goes of breathwork, is that a lot of the modern forms of breathwork stemmed after psychedelics were outlawed. People started to figure out how they could create the effects of psychedelics without the actual drugs. So a lot of times with breathwork, people will feel kind of a psychedelic effect, and that can be either, feeling very strong emotions. It can be kind of this floaty out of body experience. Maybe there's, like a deep relaxation. Maybe there's laughter. There are a lot of different experiences with breathwork, and as you've heard, beautiful listeners on this call, breathwork is almost always different every time you do it. And it's really, really, really hard to just announce to your body and to your soul and higher self that we're going to cry today. Like, it's just never goes the way I think you plan. So yeah, I wanted to say that. And also, and I've heard this on this podcast a bunch, but just for the sense of repetition, at the beginning of a breathwork session, I know Susan does this, and I always recommend that people set up boundaries, specifically around the conversation, around the communication, and anything that happens in the session. In any breathwork session, you should know that it is your session. So, all topics are on the table or off the table, depending on your comfort level. And that's also something that should always come with breathwork, is just permission, and again, agency.
Yes. Also beautiful. Interestingly enough, I want to segue into what I'm really wanting to speak with both of you about, and I'm sort of calling it the anatomy of like an accountability process. Because before we go forward, I just need to share, as you both were talking, I told Susan this, but Chauna, I hadn't told you this. I was doing a series of yoga classes last month with one of the best yoga instructors I had ever encountered. His name is Lal Maharaj, and he's just absolutely remarkable. He's at the Vastu School of Yoga, and he's from India originally. And he, in one of the classes, started doing that 3-part pattern. But his way was to only do it through the nose. And the breathwork pattern that you practice and that I went to the workshop around as well is only through the mouth. And I was just, my jaw dropped, because this was the first time I had encountered exactly the like in the belly to the heart out. And I asked him, I was like, okay, what is this breath pattern? What's the name of it? Right. And he looked at me and he just said, this is just breathing. He's like, every yogi learns this. Like, my mother taught me this. It's just, I was like, but if you had a name, and, cause we're all like, where is this from? He just said, yogic breathing. So, it is from India, at least the breath work pattern you both practice. And also, maybe the open mouth part is the part that adds to the psychedelic or adds a different, because this was sort of more just to settle and to kind of calm and to move energy, but not in that sort of fast way that we can experience with the open mouth. And so I just had to say that because I know I would forget. I just was like, wow. But to your point, Chauna, there's like, it's this big umbrella, right? And we're not always quite sure. And how I came into contact with both of you, Chauna, I met you in New York. I don't even remember. Time is so, timey, so molassesy but it was years ago, and we met there. And so I think we like kept in touch over the internet, like on social media or something. And then I believe Susan and or Chauna came to a class of mine. And then it was on protection magic. And then Susan asked a question about, well, what do you do if there's like an unethical teacher or so, it was something along those lines, you know? And I just remember the heart, like you're just so heart filled, Susan, that even in, I just was like, this is the most compassionate I just was struck by the harm that was there too, though. I could feel the hurt and I could feel the harm underneath that. And it was such a great question to bring up in the context of this class, in the class protection magic, right? What do you do if someone you've trusted or given power away to is, for lack of a better word, maybe not, ethical, I'll just say, or maybe not using power dynamics to the best of all included. And I was then introduced to this process you were having with your former teachers around a lack of accountability in their process. And I'm going to let both of you take it from there because this is your story. But I wanted to just tell the listener, I really wanted both of you to talk about this because I hear people message me about this all the time. Like, I feel uncomfortable, or my teacher is doing this, or I feel uneasy, or this person keeps asking me for money. That's like a common one. We could be here all day with the different ways in which people have contacted me feeling unsure, and sometimes I'll just use the word also traumatized, really, in certain situations. And I really was struck by witnessing both of yours and the group you were doing this within, your compassion, your clarity. It was a very heart-led, very respectful feeling process. And I really would point people to this process, to your written communication and so on and so forth, as an example of how to compassionately and respectfully get into a dialogue with someone who you feel might be behaving in unethical or even potentially harmful situations.
Yeah, I'll just start because then I'll head it over to Shauna. The I remember very vividly being on that course with you, and I was wrestling with what felt like something really unjust that was happening, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I was just really angry, and it was actually at the time that Ahmaud Arbery was killed. And so this was just on the cusp of the BLM movement. And at the time, I was talking to Chauna quite a bit. And I remember doing this aerobics class, it's called the class. And I just remember, like, I need to vent, like, I need to say this. I just couldn't understand why there was silence in this so-called wellness world when somebody's life was taken away in that manner, right? Like, just abhorrent violence. And I my head couldn't wrap itself around this caring, compassionate, soulful, spiritual world, and yet such silence when it came to something that didn't quote unquote affect you, right? Wasn't interfering in your white wellness world. I mean, that is, I do have to say that. And I ranted on it. And Shauna, I think then spoke to you actually, and I was on the course, and that's what led me to ask the question. And then you shared the video, and the video got a lot of people kind of talking about it. So again, thank you so much for sharing that, because when you have a smaller platform, it's very hard to get your message out there when you're feeling this sense of, I was perplexed, I was raging, I was confused, and that kind of then led to, then George Floyd was killed, and so then we know that whole time, which feels like such a blur. And that also brought up a lot of like, oh wow, we really need to look at this. What is going on? And that's when Chauna and I, obviously we talk all the time, but all the others, Jenny, I'm gonna, because I'm like Amy Koretsky, Miriam, Molly, we're all in that same disarray and confusion, and then we started to look at this whole situation, and we're like, this is not okay. This is not okay. And so it kind of started from there. I'll let Chauna chime in there.
During COVID, some of the actions and rhetoric from the leaders in our breathwork community showed a lack of compassion for the heightened suffering that was happening in the world. When George Floyd was murdered, the insensitivity continued. And in some ways, it got worse. We attended a breathwork training that was led by someone who insisted on, quote, staying out of politics. The training used non-inclusive language that appropriated indigenous cultures without respect or even recognition. At one point during the training, the teacher shared that he had a vision, I think it was a vision or a dream, where he was on a slave ship in shackles, implying that during a past life, he had been an African slave. I remember so many people in the room nodding at him with compassion as he sat there solemnly, eyes lowered. A Black man suffocated to death on a hot sidewalk. And I kept thinking about our breathwork training, about how staying out of politics meant ignoring the systems of racism and hate that haunt families of color, and instead focusing on a fairy tale past life as a slave. It was way past time for changes to happen in the breathwork community. The call out or call in, whatever you want to call it, was a months-long process. 6 of us brainstormed what changes we thought were necessary. We wrote a letter that discussed plans of action with plenty of resources. We asked others in our breathwork lineage to sign the letters. We wanted it to be clear that the calls for change were not from an isolated few, but a strong and passionate majority. We offered an opportunity, to recalibrate, really, to do an about face, to say, hey, I'm learning, I'm evolving. These are things that we're going to do differently. We got a response to our letter, and I'll speak for myself in saying that the response did not spark optimism. As I said, this was a months-long process. Like the rest of the world, we were individually juggling a lot. So the question was, what do we do now? There had already been so much labor and compassion poured into the process. It was exhausting. The goal was to uplift the future of the breathwork community, to spark change, not to volunteer our time and energy as like monitors of the breathwork world. So we decided to publish all of the letters in their entirety so that people could read what transpired and make their own decision. We wanted to see more people of color in leadership roles. We wanted a commitment to being trauma aware. We wanted a discussion around inclusive language. We wanted people to start, just living in the now and making a commitment to serve all people, not just ones of a certain skin tone, not just ones of a certain income. And we asked for that. We did. We outlined it. And we didn't get a big we didn't get a very promising response. I'll say that. We weren't invited in to discuss it further. At one point, some points that we asked for were mentioned publicly on a website, disguised as that person's own ideas, which was another thing we were asking for, was accountability, and for people for us to talk more about the origins of this meditation that we'd all learned. So that was kind of it. And I think there was a lot of questions around like what we wanted to do. I don't think any of us wanted to have to stalk and play police and continue to monitor what their activities were. So we just published all that we had and walked away, with the idea that that information is out there. If someone does a search, if someone is interested in knowing what we saw and what we experienced before signing up for a training or before going to a retreat, it's out there and they can do it. And that's kind of it. But yes, Sarah, I get a lot of emails, a lot of messages about still who are like, oh, I did this and I went to this training and I felt this way. I'm like, why message them? I'm sympathetic, but I feel like there was a lot of labor that's been done. So, take your grievances to that door, please. Sorry, I feel like this has been a lot of talking.
No, that's amazing. I just wanted to say as well, just to preface, that we did a lot of private exchanges prior. So there's a lot of work that went in trying to get say persons to really say, hey, guys, wake up. This is, we're trying, we need to take a different path here. So we did do a lot of that.
I want to back up just a little bit because I want to get a little bit more specific around some of the ways that the training, in your eyes and my eyes, because I went to one and never returned, was not considered, was not trauma informed, did not have cultural competency, was not inclusive. I think that a lot of times folks will go into a situation and they'll come out not feeling off or not feeling right, but because no one's speaking up, because everything sort of seems amazing, maybe even, because so many other people there might be having breakthroughs and connecting and, whatever it may be, they feel like they can't say anything, or they're just sort of like, am I overreacting, or, these kinds of things. So I kind of just wanted to parse out a few of the ways in which, looking back, you're like, oh, these things weren't making me feel safe, listened to, cared for, so on and so forth.
In planning a breathwork facilitator training, I learned a lot. And one of them had a lot to do with trauma and being trauma informed or being trauma aware. And I think some things in our specific training that we attended were just around questions that people will ask, well, what if someone has an adverse reaction to a session? What if someone is battling mental illness? A lot of these just very normal human experiences. And maybe Susan, you can correct me if I'm misquoting this, but I believe the answer was that our teacher does not work with people who are having any of those things. Specifically, our teacher has spoken with the universe, with spirit, and asked that only people who are free of all of those afflictions show up at their doorstep. That was the answer. That's a great example of a lack of trauma awareness. And I think also just a lot of kind of victim blaming, just a lot of the things that I think are pretty easily, used across, back to my air quotes, wellness spaces around, like, if someone has experienced trauma in their life, on ways it could be their fault. A lot of kind of victim blaming, a lot of, just perspective, mindset shifts instead of acknowledging systems of oppression. Yeah, things like that.
Yeah, so for me, I was coming as well from the perspective that I had never done any sort of spiritual training. This was really my first experience into that world. And so I could only really express it from like how I felt in that moment. And I'm quite intuitive. So I just remember like on the first day being super excited. And then I just remember a feeling. And I was like, I feel really uncomfortable. I couldn't name it. And what happens to me, Susan, is I start to go, there's something wrong with me, right? I'm not fitting in. And I remember being in the circle and being scared to ask questions. And I also remember the questions being answered were very vague. They weren't in depth at all. And I wasn't really gaining any knowledge as somebody who had really never had practiced any of this. It's like yes, you hold space, but I was like, well, okay, there were like an idea of like, oh, you can see around the nose if somebody is about to well up. And I'm like, okay, that's great. So they're gonna cry, but what if they're crying about something that I don't know how to deal with? And that was kind of just really passed on as more of a spiritual thing. The idea of being trauma informed was not something that was discussed there at all. And he very much did not want to talk about it from a physical standpoint, right? So anything physically going on. So that would be, i.e., anything around, because trauma can manifest physically. There was no conversation around that. The women were incredible. Had I not had the same women, I don't know that I would have felt very safe myself. I don't know that there was enough support or a safe space or even an invitation. If something has come up during this time of you training so that you can hold space for another human, if something has come up, here's a space to come and really let's go through it together. Let's really go into the depths of it, go to the root of it. That wasn't at all on the table or on the cards. And I remember leaving and really feeling that I was terrified to hold space for somebody else. And I thought, well, okay, but that's because it could be me. Okay, I'm more conscious. Maybe I have more fear. Maybe I have, I don't know, low self-worth. I don't know where I don't feel this confidence. But I'm thinking, what if somebody else was just like, oh yeah, I can do this, and just goes out into the world and is holding this space with not enough knowledge, to be honest. And so when I went to level 4, I remember specifically there were questions. It was like, write questions down that, through the levels that you were still wanting to know. And I was like, okay, great, finally, I'm going to get these. And they were again vague answers to something and an experience that is so deep. And I just couldn't understand the vagueness with which it was being received. So I mean, I definitely left knowing that I had to do a lot of my own work before I could even hold space for somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't go all the way to level 4. I dropped out at level 2. My experience of it was I first went to a training with a student of his. And so I asked her on the first day, where does this come from?
Like, what is the context of this? And her answer was, this was made up by a white guy in California. You don't have to worry, like it just was created like in the 70s or something, like and I was sort of, there was a question there. And similar to both of you, you have this experience while in the training that is profound, or at least you know that something is happening. There's no information about the nervous system. There's no background around what to do if the nervous system is getting activated. No techniques, no ways to ground yourself or your client other than saying like grab a rock and hold on to it or scream or something, but there's no ways to bring someone back into the body, specifically people with histories of trauma, disassociation, um, physical abuse, on and on and on. And Jennifer Patterson speaks is her among many others, but I'm naming her because she has a book about it, and she's very trauma informed, talks about this. So there are people talking about it. It's not that there's not people talking about that and that there's not resources out there. It's just that in these specific trainings there weren't. And so I went on to the second training, and to the lineage question, then come to find out, and again, I'd love it if y'all could correct me, but there is a phenomenon in the spiritual community. There's a name for this, and the name for this is spiritual DNA. And the story goes that then, this other teacher met someone who was Indian, and who said, we were in a past life together. And in this past life, you were Indian. That this teacher is white in this life. You were Indian and you helped me. And now I'm teaching you this pattern to repay the debt or whatever. Again, I'm paraphrasing here. It was years ago. And we call this, or it is called, there's a name for it. It's called spiritual DNA. And that is when white practitioners say, oh, I was Native American in a past life. Oh, one of my guides is from India or from this other country. So I now have access to this culture that, I'm not from, have no background in, have no idea. Because the other thing too, and I'm getting off on a tangent, I'm going to rein it in, don't you worry, and I'm going to let y'all speak. The other thing is that with so many of these practices, Buddhism or yoga, there's a huge cultural aspect to it, that stem, like, with me and Judaism and the Kabbalah, there's a huge Jewish background if you're studying the Kabbalah, which is a religious vantage point, and so if you kind of take that out, things sort of maybe change. And the last thing I will say, and so I just dropped off after that, the last thing I will say is, in terms of the body part and not feeling like something was right or not feeling okay in my body, I literally never, I mean maybe like twice in my life, have I gotten migraines. And by like the afternoon of day one, I had like a migraine so bad that I wasn't sure I was going to be able to like come back. And in fact, like the only reason I sort of did was I thought, oh, maybe it's just stuff coming up, because that's another thing they said. Oh, if you have a headache or if you're, exhausted, which is true, doing all of this, but it's just stuff, you're detoxing and like all this sort of, again, the vagueness of it all was disconcerting, so that's just what I'm going to share of my experience. And I think these are some, but there's some like points behind them, like listening to your body, the vagueness, the sort of spiritual DNA of it all, and so on and so forth.
I just wanted to bring up one point, just about a lot of like specifically, I'll talk about our breathwork training, and how it was lacking in content. And this is something Molly Harris, she runs the Breathe Network, which is this fantastic organization. But I want to give her credit in saying this to me as I say it to you all. The idea is that with a lot of like this breathwork training, and I see this with a lot of yoga trainings too, it's this idea of changing your life. This is going to be life changing, but they're not focused on training you to do anything. So we walk into these spaces like, I'm ready to have my life changed. And I think people who are struggling with, any list of things are ready for that life change. Who isn't ready for a life change? And you pay your money and you get into the space ready for a life change. And then I think a lot of that is why we kind of disarm a lot of our body is saying this isn't right, our gut reaction saying this isn't right, because we're trying to show up and be present. All of the words they throw at you in terms of, of not taking away your own growth or whatever. But essentially, there should be a difference in retreat and trainings. A retreat can change your life. A training should tell you how to do something and tell others in a comprehensive way. And I think there's this combination of the two, which is where things get a little bit mucky. And I think that's why a lot of people walk away from some of these trainings without any information, and then maybe not even a life change. So there's really just a big conflict in that, and that's what I wanted to point out.
I love that so much. I also wanted to sort of then, fast forward into your process. You started having these conversations with one another, understanding that there was this shared experience of, not being prepared and all of these, this other sort of grocery list really of other issues, right? And you then reached out privately, right, to your former teacher. Yeah. And the response was,
So just to get clarity on that, we reached out to the student who you said you had trained with. That's who we were having a lot of conversations with. And that wasn't necessarily the same dialogue we were having with the person who trained us as well. So I just want to have some clarity around that. But yes, we did send him the private email first, the letter we sent him, and his response, and his decision to not really invite us into the conversation, and also a few things that he wrote on there were just seemed to be like trying to pass it off, saying he was going to use one of the people that kind of support him, who, yes, is a therapist, and that she's suddenly going to be doing the trauma informed part. And I just thought, well, why hasn't she been doing it for the years she's been there? And I don't know how she's suddenly, it really felt like, no, you really need to get somebody that's out of that circle in there. Yeah, so the response was just very obvious that, okay, he's kind of just saying, great, thank you, I've read it, I acknowledge it. He, tried to explain some of the questions that we asked. I mean, the letters are all there, breathworkforthepeople.com. It's for everybody who would like to read it. And we put a lot of work into it. And, a lot of the people who aren't on here today put tremendous amount of work in writing.
it's deeply generous. Like it's the definition of generous in terms of resource, and it's very clear that so much labor went into this document, which I think is another piece of all of this, right?
So yeah, and so we decided to make it public, as Chauna said, for the simple reason of, okay, we've done the work. It was very exhausting, and it's obvious that we've come to a wall, and people are adults and they can read the work we've put into it, and they get to decide or check in with the person and say, have you met these requirements? And then they get to make an informed decision of whether or not they feel that this training will serve them to be able to hold space for other people. I personally don't know how you can be trained in a day sometimes, or a weekend. Now it's a weekend, to be able to hold space, which is happening at the moment. So, but there you go. And yeah, and so we needed to back away for our own mental state. We were drained, we were exhausted, we were in the middle of, I mean, it was a revolution, an awakening. And I knew deep down that we had to ride the wave, because I knew this moment would only be a moment, unfortunately. To really be able to magnify the injustices, the way people in those privileged positions don't make room to open the door for those who are marginalized, who also really need this form of healing, or a tool that they can use, a tool that they can bring to their community. Because why should I have to look at a white man train me? Why should I have to do that? So we were asking him to train people, Black, Indigenous, and I'm so glad that was what we had at the beginning. But fast forward, which was so great, was the realization of, again, we were learning through this. The big realization was, what are we doing? Why are we asking him to do that? What? But again, it's like we're also having to take away the layers of the word is not coming to my mind, but take away those layers of, oh, he's the one with the answer. And actually it's like, no. So I was so pleased when Chauna was like, actually, I'm going to take ownership of this. I am going to be the change people want to see. I'm going to be the one who is going to do a training that I would love to have been in, with a very collective approach rather than a singular guru mentality. So I'm so happy, that she felt called to do that. I certainly know that I didn't want to train people, but I think that's the beautiful thing that came out of it, was like, oh wow, no, we don't need you actually.
Yes, and so this is a great segue. Shauna, you are now leading trainings. So I want to ask you, I think I want to start with like, yeah, Susan had clarity. It was a no, like she was not called to train people. What was it? Was it your intuition? What was it that made you want to create this beautiful, wonderful, comprehensive training for folks?
Yeah, I would say it's intuitive. I think I come from a background of having led a lot of like corporate trainings and whatever job I was in, or in fitness. I watched kind of what happens when people know a modality and no one is there to train said modality. And I think I had so much respect for breathwork and so much respect for this modality as a way to really help people work through their lives. Breathwork, if you can breathe, you can do breathwork. So I wanted it to continue, but I wanted more voices in this field, more diverse voices. I wanted to have coworkers in a community where everyone, practiced anti-oppression, where people had done some work to be trauma aware. And I looked around, I did a lot of research. I found some really great programs. Most of them were missing an anti-racism stance, fun fact. And I was like, okay, y'all, I think we can do this. I think I sent everybody this 4-page document. I was like, we can do it. What do you think? And, everyone has their lives, and not everybody really wanted to just dive in to create this, which I understand a year later, because it was a ton of work, and it took a lot of focus. But yeah, it created the Breath Liberation Society. And we just were 1 month from completing our first cohort, our first training. And the idea is that we're decentralizing the guru. So while I am helping to facilitate the training, we've had guest speakers who've spoken about anti-racism, about decolonizing gender, about being trauma informed and using more trauma aware language. But it's been really amazing. And then we had 15 breathwork facilitators give interviews and share their knowledge as well. So, I think because our human experience is so different and so ever changing, I think it's really impossible to create a a learning opportunity that only shares my freaking wisdom, right? Like, so the idea was to bring the wisdom of a lot of people so that others in the training can learn and take what resonates and move on from what doesn't. I think it's important that people be able to see themselves in a facilitation program, that they can see a Black queer woman, that they can see other queer people in wellness, they can see people that are, of different body shapes and ethnic backgrounds, midwife, a Midwestern housewife, all of that. We're all in there because that's kind of what this beautiful world is all about, taking our own unique experience and sharing it with others. And then the second part is that with our clinic, and that's just because, again, I come from a fitness background where I think I had to do like 200 teaching hours. So we do have a clinic where people are going to be leading breathwork. It's the idea to bring breathwork actually to people. That's that. We're creating new voices, and we're creating some access for those to enjoy and get into breathwork as well.
I love this. So how long is your program?
It is 4 months, and it's going to get longer because, I think when we were writing all those letters last year, I was like, if you're not an expert in something, then just hire people. Like, there are so many amazing humans out there, like in the basements of shelters, like feeding people and teaching people with their lived experience. Like, they would love to work. Like, just hire them. Like, you don't have to be the jack of all trades. You can just hire people who have experience in that environment to come and teach. So that's what we've been doing. And I learned that that's a crap ton of information. Like, even as I started to do the lectures for the first weekend, I was like, oh, we don't have enough time. We don't have enough time at all. So yeah, it's 4 months. There's something called the Breathwork Alliance, and they have a standardized teaching schedule. And I think for them, their trainings are like up to a year, I think. We're not completely there because I do want people who maybe don't have that much time to be able to learn to facilitate. I think time is also something that's a privilege. And I'm trying to find a way to kind of blend the two, which is why we do have that hybrid learning where people can do some work on their own, have the community aspect where we meet in person and we do our training that way. But yeah, it's been an interesting endeavor. I've learned so much. I'm learning more. I'm really excited to continue teaching this. I think the people in it are awesome, and we're going to have some really colorful, amazing new voices in the breathwork community soon.
Chauna, this is it's so incredible. It's so amazing what you're doing. It sounds so thorough. It sounds so, dare I say, life-changing. It sounds really considerate, and I think it's sometimes we really do have to create what we want to see, like y'all said, at a certain point, there's only so many conversations you can have with people who aren't available, who aren't available to listen or to change or whatever that is. And at a certain point, you have to create your own thing. You have to create what you want to see. You have to create what you needed. And it's just absolutely amazing. I'm just sort of curious. I gotta ask, has it been healing for you in some way?
Yeah, it's been really healing. Because so when I launched the training, it was this big thing. I spent 2 hours crying at my desk trying to get the courage hit send. But once I did, people were just like, oh, thank goodness. I think it was this moment of we're not alone in this. There are quite a few people in even this training right now who were like, I really wanted to learn to lead breathwork. There was no way I was going down the paths that were available. I'm so glad you did this. Yeah, it is healing because I think it's easy for, people were really upset when we started writing these letters, which we didn't talk about. When we published the letters, people were really upset. They felt like we'd attacked their whole, sense of life. And it wasn't the people who the letters were to. It was students who were unable to, battle the duality of this person changed my life and they need to grow and evolve. They weren't willing to do that. They just felt attacked. So yeah, it was really cool to see people who were just grateful for the hard work. It's been cool to see people who also share a love of breathwork, but also knew that it was time for a change.
Yeah, and I also want to say, because when we had written the letters, a lot of people also, writing to us and going, okay, but then where do I go? And so that was something we were kind of left in the void with, because we were like, I know, and we wish, and so I'm so glad that now we have, somebody that we can say, okay, go to Chauna. You know what I mean? She's got a great training, and you'll be in great hands. And yeah, and I just, again, want to say I just love that it's a collective. I think it is so important for all voices to be shared, because as well, resonate, who do you resonate with, like bringing in different people to lead breath work in that training is also great, because people get to resonate maybe with one person and their style of leading. And so I think and know that, oh wow, I can lead this way, this feels more kind of like my jam, so having that available to them is incredible.
It also really underscores this whole collaboration, not competition, because when there's that one person, it just there's just a power dynamic that isn't a power dynamic. I don't it's just so old school, like it's about the collective. I firmly believe, I'm using the word, I said I didn't like it, but I mean, I like the word, it's just the way it's used with the vagueness. But I believe we do heal in community. We heal with one another. We heal through being able to, feel not so alone, learn from other people's experiences, have our perspective shift and change through being with one another in vulnerable and open and transparent spaces. And so I just love that you really are creating this whole completely present day, completely aligned with your values, that people can go to as a resource. And so, yeah, I just love it. And I love that y'all were be able, like, your friendship helped you like through all of this. And, I know, Susan, like, you are still in your private practice. I'd love it if you could just like speak a little bit about that as well, to sort of see like if there's, what you've learned the most, or how you've grown and changed, over the last few years as well, seeing clients, because I've gone to some of your breathwork classes and they're just really beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Oh gosh, I've, in that context, I love the word healed, right? Because it really is in community that we do heal. And one of the thing that I love the most about leading group breath work is actually being together. And I love when people share, because I truly believe that it is when you're heard, when you're seen, and when somebody truly sees you for who you are and accepts all of you. I think that is how we heal. And also I recognize myself in so many people, and that was a form of healing. And interestingly enough, I was somebody who, in a group, I could barely say my name. And people go, well, you're an actor. I was like, it's a completely different thing. Reading a script, like, it's like, and being a person is great. That's where I get to put the mask on and I get to pretend. But being me was really challenging. And actually, the group, even though I'm leading it, that healed me and is still healing me. And one thing I recognized very early on is that I'm constantly the student as I'm constantly the teacher. And the people that are in this circle or come to these groups are also students and teachers. I learn so much from them, and us sharing our vulnerability, and to me, seeing how much strength and courage it takes to speak on the depths of your heart. It's like it is going back to, but that's a very kind of life affirming moment, right? And it also made me truly understand that there is no fix all, right? This is a journey. And so we're all journeying together. And also this kind of work isn't, there's no line. It's up and down, it's jagged, it's, you know, like I even have like my family will come to me and be like, if I like put up a boundary and they're like, aren't you supposed to be forgiving? Don't you work in this wellness thing? And I'm like, yeah, I work in the wellness thing. And you know what they teach you there too? Boundaries. So move on, you know, like, so it's like, because people expect you to be a certain way. It's like, actually, it's the most incredible way to really be all of you and love all of you and accept all of you. And, you know, so I really loved holding the groups. And I also love having the private clients as well, because we get to be more intimate. We get to have that, you know, one-on-one time. We get to really delve deeper. So that's also something that I truly treasure. And I don't take it for granted, you know, that this is someone's heart coming to me.
Yes. So you two, such a generous conversation, such generous, gifted, lovely human beings. I'm so grateful to both of you. My friends, where can folks find you? What's on the horizon for you? Like, just give us all the details, because I know people are going to want to know.
Okay, so I am at susanateh.com. You can also find me on Instagram at Irish Infused. I'm open to privates right now, so one-on-ones. You can book that on the website. And I'm also, I created a 6-week workshop called Your Inner Voyage. So that's also something that I hope to, I'll start it in October, but I'm also, you know, I'm hoping that every 3 months I'll be able to open that up to folks, and that will be a group setting. And I think it'll be a beautiful way for people to really delve in more detail and get to experience and experiment with yourself, and you know, get to know yourself. I mean, isn't that like, just get to know yourself, right? All the different little aspects. It's beautiful. It's hard sometimes, but it's also so, it is beautiful work. It really is. Yeah.
I was just admiring you, Susan. I'm like, I wish Susan, like everything you say is just so like, it's beautiful and flowy and like this curated vocal experience. I was like listening to your cadence. I was like, I wonder if I could match that. So here's my quick cadence. We have another Breathwork facilitator cohort starting in the early winter of 2022. It did sell out pretty quickly last time. So if you are interested in it, please sign up for the wait list. I usually give the people on the wait list a heads up in advance. And we also have a bridge program for people who are already breathwork facilitators and interested in kind of bridging the gap between some of the learnings and some of the competencies that were not addressed in your first training. You can come learn them here. And the Frankie Hugh Clinic, that's named after my grandmother's. That is a wing of the Breath Liberation Society where we are leading virtual breathwork sessions, private sessions at a very low cost rate. So please look that up. All the proceeds from that clinic do go towards the Breathwork Facilitator Fund. That's going to help bring more voices, more diverse faces to the breathwork community. And I also lead breathwork on my own, but for now, just find all that stuff.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. It was so great to be with you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
That was our show. I hope it made you feel supported. I hope it gave you some food for thought. I hope it brought up some stuff for you to maybe think about as you move forward, wherever you are moving forward. And I want to give a big thanks to Chauna and Susan. They're both such warm-hearted, brilliant, talented people, and I feel lucky to know them. All of the info on how you can contact them or work with them is, of course, in the show notes. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I'll be back soon. Bye for now. Moonbeaming is brought to you by the Moon Studio. We are created and hosted by Sarah Faith Gottesdiener. Editing is by Caitlin George Parker, and the sound is by Will Owen. Thank you for your support. Witches in the autumn leaves, collecting things for